Ladies and gentlemen, Pararena.
Hey everybody, welcome to Ron's Computer Videos and a special MARCHintosh edition of the interview series. Got a great guest. It's John Calhoun, Macintosh game development legend, creator of Glider and Glypha, and the author of tonight's focus, which is a little game called Pararena. John, how are you?
Good. Yeah, I'm going to apologize. Getting older, and I have to wear reading glasses just to be able to focus on the screen. I don't normally wear glasses, and I apologize for the reflection too.
It's okay. I will put on the glasses that I use to solder, which make my eyes really huge, because I can't see anything up close anymore. So I get it.
So I got a question for you.
Sure.
I'm asking because you and I are both Midwesterners, both grew up in the Midwest. So I had a friend who went down to college, and when she got down there, she said that somebody had put on the elevator, inside the elevator at the dorm, like, what do you call? And it was kind of like, local, like pop versus soda.
Yes.
So I got a couple for you, and I'm going to see if you and I are in sync, just because we're just on two different sides of Missouri.
Do you want me to write mine down so that way that I'm not like...
No, that's fine.
Okay. I was going to make sure. Okay.
No, I'll take your word for it.
Okay.
So the first one is, what do you call it when you throw toilet paper into somebody's tree as a prank?
I think it's like TPing.
Yeah.
Okay.
So apparently, we always called it TP in somebody's tree. But apparently the popular name for it down south was a rap job.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
So here's the only other one I have here, and it's a little, this is a tricky one.
Okay.
Again, I guess we're in the category of what do you call, like vandalism. I guess we're in the category of vandalism. So what do you call it when you drive into somebody's yard and just spin circles around and sort of tear up their yard and then drive off?
I think it's like doing donuts. Would that be?
I think that's what my wife said that it was called up in Omaha, but down in Kansas City, it was farming somebody's yard.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And then the girl that went down to college said that they called it a lawn job there. I see a pattern. But when I first met my my sister's boyfriend that became her husband, he's from New York, and when I mentioned, what do you call driving, through somebody's yard to tear up their yard, and he was just aghast, like, vandalism,
Yeah, it's just a more generic sort of way of putting it.
Well, I guess they did. That wasn't a thing in the East Coast, so he was horrified that we did that. But yeah, we did that. Farming.
No, I have never heard it called that, but that's really interesting. I can certainly see it. Yeah, as you get closer to Kansas, maybe with all the farm stuff. Yeah, I'm not saying Illinois because I'm closer. I'm kind of right on the Illinois-Missouri border, so we get a lot of that. And this is it's a lot of farming, in this area of the world. So I don't know. Yeah, that's pretty crazy. I would see somebody from New York could be like in their front lawn, and it's stereotypically. You mean like what? You mean the bodega? The bodega down there? What are you talking about?
So what do you want to ask me about Pararena?
Well, I just thought it would be kind of fun because that's I know you made an updated version of Glypha that released I think just a couple of years ago.
Oh, on Steam.
And yeah, and everybody likes to talk about Glider,
Yeah.
but I think that Pararena is a fun game that doesn't get the publicity, doesn't get the talk that I think it really deserves. So let's correct that wrong in 2026, right?
Okay.
Fair enough. Seems like it's as good a thing to talk about as anything, and I don't get to see you every day, so I figured that this would be a fun thing to maybe chat about and take a little walk down memory lane.
Sure. Well, I can tell you that well, I don't know. Do you want to talk about like the shareware version or the Cassidy and Greene version? Or?
Well, I wanted to ask you very first, why, just in a general sense, why the Macintosh as a platform for games?
Well, because I had a Macintosh. That's the obvious answer, but it was because I fell in love with that machine when I first saw it. I don't know if I've told you this story, but a guy I went to high school with, he ended up going off to Carnegie Mellon University back in we graduated in 82. So one summer he came back, and it would have to have been at least 84 since the Mac didn't appear till 84. But he comes back from Carnegie Mellon, and he's brought back with him a Macintosh, and it was probably a 512 or something. The Plus hadn't even come out yet. So it was either a 128K or a 512. And I feel like that Apple had given, or maybe Carnegie Mellon had purchased Macs for every room in the dorm. And they started setting up, I don't know if it was Apple Talk networks at that time, but setting up networking. And so everybody on a floor in the dorms had a Macintosh networked. And so, you can imagine a bunch of CS majors. But anyway, he brings back this Mac, and I'd never seen one before. And he also brought with him an image writer. And when I saw like MacPaint, and we started laying out tape labels, and it took a bit of kind of iterating to where you try to lay out a rectangle and you print it on the image writer and you cut it out, and then you see, does it fit inside of a cassette, an audio cassette shell, jewel box, and then but eventually once you have more or less a template, then yeah, we were making up our own tape labels and using different fonts and that sort of thing. And I just immediately I fell in love with that machine. I didn't know how I was going to afford one, but it was clear that the PC and the that sort of track of computers wasn't interesting. But I did finally get a student loan when I was in college some years later, and was able to justify in my head purchasing a Mac Plus. Apple they had a deal where student discount, if you were in a college, you could get it for I'm going to say $2,000 or something like that. It was probably $2,500 at the time, so $2,000 and a student loan, I was able to pick one of these up. And I'd been using them at the university because they'd had a kind of a computer lab, and you'd go down there and you'd sort of book a time slot, maybe an hour or something, and then you'd spend that hour. You maybe had already written up your paper on Spiral Notebook, and you spend that hour in MacWrite or whatever, typing it up and then printing it. So I thought, hey, buy Macintosh at home. I don't have to go to the lab. I don't have to sign up for these little out. But all that was more or less just an excuse, because I really wanted to get a Mac and play with MacPaint again and that. And then once I got a Macintosh, a professor was selling a copy of Turbo Pascal and had advertised it in the student newspaper. Just, it was serendipitous. It was right at the time that I just bought my Mac. And so, okay, Turbo Pascal, whatever that is, I knew it was a language. And so I figured I bought it and tried to learn how to program in it. And so in time I was writing games. So, so it was the computer I had. I did enjoy writing games. I've been writing little game-ish like things on like the Commodore 64 and the VIC-20 or whatever I was able to get my hands on up to that point. So yeah, it was no surprise I get a Mac. I'll see if I can figure out how to write games on this machine. So that's what I did.
You certainly did.
Well, there was, back then, no internet. I mean, I guess there was there was an internet, there wasn't a web, but it was one of these, you could either connect with, what were all those services like Gopher and Fido, or
bring up your Archie client and
FTP. There's the one that was popular because you could connect to other servers that were on other universities or military.mil.gov or .edu, and that's where you'd find shareware and things like that, and could download Mac. They'd have folders for Macintosh and games, and so I downloaded a lot of shareware that way. But anyway, what I was getting at was finding out information on how to program was a bit of a challenge back then. But there was some guy I knew on campus that was kind of figuring out how to write games, and he had an issue of, I was going to say Develop Magazine or MacTutor, or I think it was it was very early kind of programming magazine. Well, Develop Apple did. I think it may have MacTutor became Develop or something. I was recently trying to track it down, and I was able to find the issue of MacTutor that showed you how to do how to create off-screen bitmaps. And if you could create an off-screen bitmap, you could render to the Mac and not have any tearing. And so things like a game with animation would start to, otherwise they wouldn't flicker. They wouldn't, if you tried to just render it to the screen, and, you would get this horrible flicker. But yeah, so this guy let me make a Xerox copy of this article from, like, say, MacTutor or something. And that just opened the doors. Wow, now I can do animation, and it doesn't flicker and that. And so, Glider, and then later Pararena, and all the other sorts of shareware, Glypha, the other shareware things that I did was more or less from that. And this guy too, I remember he had done a lunar lander program, and it was quite cool. And I thought it was cool. I thought it was pretty nice. I don't think he ever published it. He never put it out there as freeware or shareware or anything. But I ran into him, I feel like a year or two later, after I'd written a bunch of shareware titles, and I said, well, hey, thanks for, turning me on to how to create bitmaps. And I think he had shared with me his source code for his lunar lander game as well. And he said, oh, come on, he said, you took it and just went way past me on it. And I didn't think I did. I just thought that, no, I think we're on parity here. But I think he was just saying that I had done more, I don't know, different things with it. Instead of doing lunar lander, I did a paper airplane game, and then later Pararena and Glypha and that sort of thing. But anyway, yeah, that's the way that started. That's why I wrote games for the Mac. I had a Mac, and at the same time too, I mean, there weren't a lot of games, right?
Right.
So it was sort of like, well, you wrote stuff that you wrote games that you wanted to play. So it was kind of like, yeah, maybe if there had been a lot more games on the Mac, there wouldn't have been anything that I would have wanted to have played was there. But yeah, I don't know. Just, I think too, there's a sort of fun creative aspect to it. You kind of want to try some things, and just, it gives you a chance to do some artwork. It gives you a chance to, do sounds and that sort of thing. So it was just kind of like the whole thing was just kind of fun to try.
Yeah. Well, and that's kind of the answer that you hear from a lot of folks, where it's like, I had a Mac, or I was really interested, I wanted to get into the Mac. It seemed like a very exciting platform. And then you've got companies like Bungie that have gone on to, make crazy stuff that are like, we chose the Mac because we could be a big fish in a small pond.
Yeah, no, there was no thinking about it. Like, I didn't choose it. It was like I was only going to write for the Mac and nothing else. In fact, I didn't do the port of Glider to Windows. Another guy did. I was absolutely not interested in learning Windows. And just a little bit of an aside, but when I did start working at Apple, and Apple was, as you may remember, at a certain point, it was kind of circling the drain, and people were, there were massive layoffs. Just when I working there, entire departments would get laid off, and they'd be just down the hall. And so these blue dumpsters would show up in the hallway, and machines would start piling up. And these were all people that had been let go, and then their offices were emptied out, machines were thrown into dumpsters. And then the rest of us, a bunch of assholes that we were, we'd go rifling through the machines, and we'd pull out hard drives, we'd pull out RAM. And so our machines were maxed out. We were maxed out on RAM, maxed to get the biggest hard drive, just from essentially, scrounging through but what I was going to say, though, is it looked at that time like maybe all of Apple would get shut down, or maybe my turn would come up and the team I was on would get laid off. And it wasn't a question that I was going to go work at, some other company like Microsoft or who knows what. If I'd gotten let go by Apple, I just would have, I don't know, I suppose I would have gone back to teaching, which was what my degree was. I never had taught, but I thought I'll probably just start teaching, and So my point was, I just really love the Mac, and I only wanted to program the Mac. And I'm not a general purpose programmer. At least I wasn't then. I was just very focused on this one machine, and the idea of programming on Windows or something just was alien to me, and I wouldn't. I guess now with Steam and everything, and having worked at Apple for some time, I feel a little more, I don't know, like more general as a programmer, and that, I'd done web stuff and that, and it's kind of like, yeah, okay, maybe I would have been happy-ish working at, on a PC or something like that. Because there is a fun to just coding itself. I mean, that's kind of but yeah, I mean, the whole UI that Apple had put forward, the whole toolbox that had dialogues and menus, they looked good. And so with not a lot of effort, you could make an app that looked good too. So yeah, I don't know. It wasn't me making any kind of a plan, like coming up with a business plan and targeting the Mac, because I'll be a big fish in a small pond. I found myself in this small pond because I love that pond,
That's very cool. And that's probably the best attitude. It's more like, I'm going to go into this creative space. I'm going to see what I can do to make a name for myself without it's just,
I had no idea I was going to make a name for myself. I mean, I was scared putting the stuff out there, because as soon as I uploaded to, again, it was FTP, I go in FTP to, I'm trying.
UMich was like the place I down. Yeah. I mean, that's UMich the big
was
one.
One of the big. That's what I was trying to remember, were some of the big ones. But yeah, it would be like UMich, and they'd have you could FTP into UMich, and then there would be a directory for incoming or something, and then you could upload. You could FTP, and so the first time I uploaded Glider to an incoming folder on, I was scared. I'm like, oh shit! Now people are going to judge me, and if it sucks, they're going to say so. So I was not trying to make a name for myself. I was scared to death. But at the same time, I was kind of hoping that I don't know, that somebody would like it. So
I think enough did that we're talking about it all these years later, for sure.
Well, that's the surprise, and I was just as surprised that anybody even bothered to send any shareware. And I probably may have mentioned this before, but I feel like the shareware was $5 or $10 or something like that.
Yeah.
And the surprise was, so once you upload it to like UMich, it would kind of just make its way. It would start popping up at other FTP sites around the country, maybe around the world, for all I know. But so something happened where, in time, I started to get checks in the mail for Glider, and kind of at some point I was getting maybe $10 a week or so. And at that time, my wife and I, she was my girlfriend then. We were in an apartment, and $10 would get you a small pizza and 2 Cokes from Pizza Shuttle in Lawrence, Kansas. And hey, so it was Pizza Shuttle every Friday, just sort of celebrating. Hey, got some shareware checks. That means it's Pizza Shuttle on Friday. So we enjoyed that. One problem I had with it, though, is often they would write a letter, and they would say that, they like this, or they're asking, they're asking for a feature or something. And I felt really obliged, since somebody just sent me money, I felt obliged to reply to everyone. And it got to be a real big burden. Thanks for the shareware, or that's a good idea, or, and so at some point it was like, man, this is kind of a pain in the ass, actually, the shareware thing. But I brought it on myself. But sometimes they'd ask questions, and it's like, what am I going to do? Just cash their check, go buy pizza Shuttle, and then just bin their, So I tried to reply to everybody for the shareware version, but.
Yeah. Well, that's nice though, because it's one of those things where I just recently reached out to Al Lowe, like the father of like the Leisure Larry series, and wrote conceivably wrote other things, but no, it's but he responds to every email he gets. It's like so it's one of those things where it's just like, hey, I just, I'm still out here, and it's great to hear from people that you kind of remember all that. But yeah, I could see where after a while that would be a lot, especially with snail mail to stay on top of.
Yeah, that was it. Yeah, I'd have to physically write something, fold it up, put it in. Yeah.
Is this the week? Is this the week I got to put penny stamps on everything? Come on.
Yeah. So anyway, so yeah, that I just kept having fun writing games for the Mac, and still do.
Well, I certainly appreciate it. As somebody that was the recipient of all of this largesse, it was greatly appreciated, because again, it was a neat thing that you could take and you could show to your PC friends that did not exist in their ecosystem, and they're like, oh, this is really neat. This is kind of a fun platformery kind of thing. That's it's there were other stuff, but it just didn't have the polish. It didn't, like you were saying earlier, with like the toolbox tools and everything you could kind of leverage to make your stuff look better. It wasn't the same, especially in the Windows 3.1 era, especially in the DOS era.
Eventually they caught up to some degree.
Sure. Well, it's we mentioned Glider and all of that, and again, I'm a big Glypha fan as well, but Pararena is kind of the game that I think in the kind of the trilogy that maybe it didn't always get the love and the kind of acclaim that it really deserves, because I think it's a very ambitious game, just especially for the era, because it kind of has that sort of isometric 2.5D sort of, like, you with scaling, you have to kind of figure out like where you are in 3D space, but kind of from a 2D kind of visual. So I am absolutely terrible at this game, but I keep at it, because I'm always telling myself, this is going to be the year. This is going to be the year where I actually get good at Pararena. It never happens, but I like to tell myself that.
I'll tell you, if you can play it on real hardware and not on emulator, I think you're gonna that makes a huge difference. Certainly there's certainly the commercial one. I haven't tried the shareware one in an emulator. I wonder if it is a little more performant. It just because it's in black and white, it might be. But yeah, I just often too, especially certainly the commercial one. Again, I can't remember the shareware one. If like I take over the screen and hide the menu bar, and then the mouse is so important to the game that it's very easy on an emulator to move the mouse outside of the window or something, and then you either end up clicking off the emulator or exiting the emulator or something. So again, for performance reasons, and because it takes over the screen and the mouse, it's probably best to, if you can, get a real Mac, real vintage hardware, and try it on that. But
it plays real nice on a Quadra 700. It plays real nice on a Quadra 650. Like an 040 machine with lots of RAM, the faster kind of video circuitry built in. It looks great. and and those machines are, especially Quadra 650, those machines are pretty accessible these days. Quadra 605 if you can't find one of those other ones, but it's there's lots of good ways to play it on real hardware and have the peak experience. I like you said, emulator, it's kind of iffy, and I think that's just because of there's a little input delay, and this game is not very forgiving with input delay.
Yeah, that's maybe that's part of the problem too. Yeah, no, it's not. I was sometimes when I would do a game, it was just kind of like I was just kind of playing around, and I think for Pararena, what I remember was I just did you see the dish, right? That's but all I had was some marbles rolling around, and when the marbles would hit, they'd collide and bounce. So it was kind of a physics simulation of a bowl with marbles in it. I mean, that's really all it was, and it was kind of, I suppose I was, like as you were saying earlier, I suppose I was playing around with can I get away with this 2.5D, like a sort of, I always think of it as sort of a grandstand view where you're kind of elevated looking down. But yeah, you're right. It's not real 3D. It's fake 3D. But I kind of had this idea, let me try this out, because I thought, I could essentially render this dish, and it's just a parabola. I mean, that's where Pararena comes from. It's a parabola, but it's like a parabola from the origin to 0.25 or some fraction of if it would have kept going up, it would have become the full kind of parabola that you're used to. But it's just kind of the lower part of the parabola, and so part of that is because the math's easy. It's just an x squared, or y squared is y equals x squared, or some kind of very simple, straightforward math. And then furthermore, so if you render this thing and then you kind of skew everything, then you get this sort of pseudo 3D, this sort of 2.5D. Well, that same skewing code couldn't be used for the marbles that were rolling around. I can sort of take their position where they are in the dish and do the same skewing, and they should look visually like where they should be in the dish. And then furthermore, again, partly because it was a parabola, the sort of angle that would affect the physics was trivial, was pretty straightforward. Back then, and maybe to some degree still, the kinds of functions you needed, like sine and cosine, just to figure out where around this dish you were, and then what the x and y component would be to, if you're up on the edge of the dish, there's a force that's trying to push you to the center of the dish. The dish itself is pitched, and so if you're up on the edge, you want to roll down towards the center. Well, the center is going to be based on where around the dish you are. If you're at 12 o'clock, it's just straight down. But to the degree you're not at 12 o'clock, if you're at 1 o'clock or something, there's some component that's pulling you in the x direction and some component that's pushing you in the y direction. So it's kind of like, there was a lot of sine and cosine, some trig to figure out what the two components are. And so I wanted to see if you could do that, if you could do that kind of math in real time, and you couldn't. But then I said, well, I've heard about these lookup tables, so I could maybe figure out what the sine and cosine, what the force components are on a number of places around the dish. And then if you're somewhere in between, I'll do some kind of, I'm telling you, I'm blank. The older I get, I just start blanking out.
Is it sort of like a split the difference?
Yeah, right. Yeah. But there's a term for not integration, but not approximation, but yeah, where essentially you take here's what I know. I know the value here and I know the value here. And if I'm 25% close to this value and 75% away the other one, then I can weigh the two and come up with it's just on the tip of my tongue. But anyway, come up with that value. So that means that you could up front calculate all the values on the dish in a kind of a rough grid. And then based on wherever the player or the ball happens to be on the grid, you can kind of look it up and then do some calculation to sort of do a quick estimate of what probably would be at that point. And then, yeah, so some part of it was kind of a physics demo experiment. But then once I had it kind of displaying the dish and balls rolling around, and then I would do a collision between the balls. I'd check the radius, whatever the radius of the balls are. I would check all the neighboring balls or all the other balls to see if you're within from within the radius of another ball. And then, oh, I am. So we've collided. And then again, there was a little bit of math to figure out, how you're going to ricochet when the two of you, the two balls bounce, which direction they're going to ricochet. I mean, it's no different than a billiards, a pool game or something that you might. So yeah, then once I had the kind of physics worked out and it was displaying in the way that you see it, and you're just kind of bouncing balls around, I thought, well, I don't know, is there a game here? Can I maybe have a player? I mean, it looked to me kind of like roller arena. So I thought, well, maybe, some kind of a roller arena type game. And then, of course, I'd seen the movie Rollerball when I was a kid, when that had come out in the theater. And I was a big fan of that sci-fi film. So I thought, yeah, why don't I take maybe the sort of idea of Rollerball where there's a ball going around this dish, this parabolic dish, and then two players, and you try to grab the ball and then put it into the goal, and that was it.
Yep.
And it was relatively fun, and that's kind of the sort of test, is because there were a lot of games that I'd started, and I get to a point where you can kind of play with them and say, is there something interesting here? Is it compelling? And Pararena was one that passed the test for me. And I think part of it too, I know it's a difficult game, trying to get the ball, then trying to actually line up and release the ball at just the right time to get it into the goal. I know it's difficult, but it's one of those things that when you're writing the thing, you spend so many hours playing it that I got good at it. And then it was fun. What I, kind of maybe missed was that somebody coming to it brand new might not find it fun because it takes a while to kind of get the nuance of it. So
it does, but the original shareware version of the game, you are kind of just thrown into the game, and when the 2.0, the later version came out, there's at least a escape practice where you can kind of go in there and you can learn a little bit more about how the movement of the world kind of happens. So as somebody who downloaded and played the shareware version first, I had a lot of experience with that. And then when the later version came out, it was a lot easier. But it was still nice, at least for people that kind of got on at that time, to have some of these other things. And with the AI, that you could basically play against somebody that was less than like a human player in terms of like skill. So you could really learn all that. But
that Simple George.
Yeah, Simple George.
I was been playing it the past day or so, and I'm like, oh yeah, Simple George and Mad Mara, and that's right. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say it because that's fun too. That was part of kind of the later version where you've got the AI characters and all of that. So but I like the naming because it immediately made me think about Shuffle Puck and like those type of things. So
I'm sure I was inspired by Shuffle Puck, the different characters that you would play against, and some of them were really, really difficult, and some of them were easy. Yeah, I'm sure I was inspired by that. I don't remember it specifically, but yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah. Well, no, it is a lot of fun, and it does reward you for sticking with it and playing, and you're not going to go through and just go to the highest level in one day. That's Twitch skills and everything that take a lifetime to build. I'm not there yet, but I just turned 50, so I feel like I got a little time left.
Yeah, I was so, after Cassidy and Greene published Glider, they came back and said, well, what else do you have? And I said, well, there's Glypha, but it's a knockoff of Joust. So, Atari is litigious, so I didn't want to even consider Glypha. So I said, well, there's this game Pararena that I did. But it wasn't nearly as popular as Glider. Just the shareware one wasn't nearly as popular. But they said why not? And
Yeah.
so I had to kind of think, well, gee, it's when Glider went from shareware to commercial. I mean, besides going to color, and Pararena was, of course, would do the same. I had the whole editor, and it was a huge house, and so I was kind of scratching my head as to, what I could do to Pararena to make it seem like it's worth paying for. That would make it sort of commercial worthy, and interpolation. Sorry, the word just came to me. Interpolate between 2 points to find out, so if you just did enough points, you could interpolate between them anyway. So part of it was like you said, I can put in a practice level so that you can kind of get your chops and figure that out. That would be something that you might expect for a commercial game. Shareware, it's like, hey, you're on your own. If you can't figure out the game, you don't like it, delete it, don't pay for it, don't worry about it. But somebody that's already paid for the game, commercial kind of raises the bar. And then, for opponents, and a varying degree of challenging, and challengingness. I don't remember how they varied in terms of was it speed. I feel like that one of the things they did was, I feel like the dumber opponents tend to go after the ball, whereas the smarter ones, the better opponents, the more challenging opponents, they, like the hockey player says, they go to where the ball is headed. Yeah. So I think there was something where I would take the velocity of the ball and I would look ahead however far and say, well, okay, a second from now, the ball should be here, assuming nobody picks it up or, goes into the goal or whatever. So I would sort of anticipate where the ball was going to be, and I would have the better players go for that point and not go to the point where the ball was, whereas Simple George goes where the ball is, whereas you get up to Miss Teak, she's going for where the ball's going to be in about a half second or a second. So I think that's kind of, I didn't want to cheat where like they're just twice as fast as you or something, come on, man. This dude just like races across where they got a jetpack on or something. So I had to figure out a way to make them more challenging, but not give them more skills than you had. I don't think they can turn any faster, stop any faster, assuming you could somehow snap the mouse from one side of the screen to the other. I don't think they can go any. So it's just them looking ahead, and
I think that's how a lot of that stuff works. That they can see so far into the future, and that's what kind of gives them what their advantage is. But the challenge doesn't feel unfair, which is maybe the most important part of that. It would be different if if you had characters that were just super aggressive or just did not have to obey the physics of the game.
Yeah, exactly.
And so like that's kind of a complaint about a lot of arcade games where like the idea was that you had to be taken in a quarter every 90 seconds. So the computer would just intentionally cheat. But that's never been my experience. It's like if something goes wrong, it's because you didn't respond quick enough to whatever that situation was.
Yeah. So I'm thinking back to, looking at the game too, and remembering that like the instant replay, the announcer, those were things that I added as just sort of eye candy to again make it feel like it was one notch above shareware. And and then there were tournaments, and this is kind of it's even if you just played against Simple George, one of the easiest character to beat, there was still kind of this notion of having a tournament where you would have to win so many games, and then you'd get this prize, and if you could win, I don't remember how it worked, if you had to play against all the different opponents and defeat them in a game, but you kind of would move up. So it was kind of like an early what do they call when there's achievements, it was kind of like an
you
early,
unlock the next
and but then again that was another thing that the shareware game didn't have. But again, I felt like have to kind of raise the bar on the commercial one. So let's put some achievements in. And then somebody that can work all the way through the achievements can feel like they really accomplished something, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. It's nice that you can kind of, and I think building those type of things into the game keeps people coming back. It's not just something where it's just like, oh, I played against this thing and that's it. So that's sort of the design philosophy that went into Shufflepuck Cafe versus like just Shufflepuck.
Yeah.
Which is just like you're just playing Pong. It's, you know, so you've got this, your world building, you've got a little narrative and stuff you can kind of follow that. Yeah, it makes all the difference, and it makes people engage. And then you remember that people don't talk about Shufflepuck. They talk about Shufflepuck Cafe. They don't talk about a generic, you know, sort of like game where you're just like, oh, shoot the ball in the hoop. It's but they're talking about Pararena. So that's good.
Yeah. So Pararena, like, it never really was popular. I mean, it obviously didn't do as well as Glider, but what's weird about Pararena is that there are occasionally, like maybe 2 or 3 times in my life, I've met somebody who they just totally got it. They dug it. They built up the reflexes and got really good at it. And for them, they just really dug Pararena. They really, really enjoyed it. And so there's like, I guess there's a niche there. There's a small group of people that kind of enjoyed that. But yeah, no, it wasn't, it didn't do very well. In fact, so when Glider came out from Cassidy and Greene, and then it was successful, and they said, well, what else can I do? Pararena, it was so bad. It did so poorly that it was pretty clear to me, like, maybe I ought to go back and do another version of Glider. I didn't want to. I mean, I felt like that's just sort of milking, like, oh, well, let's just do Glider 2 and Glider 3. That felt like,
it worked for the Jurassic Park films.
Yeah, I know. Well,
you know,
I don't know.
You stick. I mean, if people, again, it's an infinitely expandable thing that you built. So, but to have something that does kind of up, like the other big thing that I think we mentioned for just a brief second is that the commercial version is color. Versus the shareware version, which is strictly black and white. Now, granted, the commercial product does also run in black and white, which is really nice. So that way you're not leaving people out in the cold that have older Macs or whatever. But I mean, it made a big difference, and it was kind of nice. And not just that, but it's 16 color, which is that's important for that time, because it meant that you could play it on the LCs in the computer lab at school.
Did they only run up to 16 colors? Is that true?
I think the default, I think the very base video card for the Mac 2 was 16 colors.
Oh, no kidding.
And then so I'm fairly certain that an LC, a straight LC with just the base video memory, which I promise is like 256K or something like that. I think the default was 16 color. It would do 256 colors, but at a speed cut, because again, it's a 16 megahertz 020 with no FPU. It's kind of a dog.
Well, I had the 2SI, which was just the big brother of the LC. I mean, they were practically the same machine. And so
20 megahertz. Yeah, 20 megahertz. But at least you had more of a RAM ceiling. Because like the LC is like limited to 10 megs and
could be. And neither of us had a math coprocessor though, and that was always fun. Launch an app and it just crashes outright because they didn't check. Oh, you're on 030, you must have a math coprocessor. Nope. Right. But yeah, no. I think the 16 colors. The idea at that time was that I mean, I didn't think the game needed more than 16. I mean, you can look at the screen there behind us. There's enough dithering to give you what looks to be more than 16 colors. But I mean, in theory, it was twice as fast as 256 colors.
Yeah,
because you're moving half as many bytes to move the characters around. So I was hoping in terms of performance that keeping it to 16 colors meant that that the game would run at faster. But in fact, it sort of does frustrate me when I'm running an emulator and I'm in millions or something, and you launch Pararena, it takes you down to 16 colors, and the Mac OS just looks horrible in 16 colors. At least when you get to about System 7, you know, they really didn't design the OS to be run in 16 colors, so it just kind of looks a little garish. But
still, that's all the more reason to keep a System 7.1 machine around, specifically for playing these old games. And there's never been a better time to get one of these old machines and set it all up. I mean, it's hard drive emulators like the Blue Scuzzy and video scaler solutions and things like that. You don't even have to have like a dedicated CRT. You just,
and you can go and pull down all the games and apps for the Mac you want. They're all out there.
Yeah. It's there's never been a better time. If you would have told me when I was a teenager about how cool the future was going to be, I would not have believed it. I would have been like, oh no. I was one of those kids that you would go, like there was a sysops meeting in town. You would go to the sysops meeting. They'd be like, who's this kid? And the guy that ran the Mac BBS be like, oh, he's with me. So, and then you just get dropped off at some random stranger's house. The 90s, just get dropped off at some random stranger's house with a stack of floppies and copy and do things. And I have mended my ways now. It's like, when you're a kid, you it's hook or crook, and then you get a little older and you're like, oh, well, I've got some money now, so I'm gonna actually pay for all these things.
No, I think at the same time too, they baked piracy into the pricing of if they knew that nobody was going to steal the games, they probably would have sold them for $5, and then they might have actually sold more if they'd have done that. But nobody chased that model, not until I guess Shareware with Quake or Doom or something. They finally said, hey, how about we just give it away? And
or do episodic content. It was like the first one's free, kid, and then you can kind of add the other stuff on. But that's actually a really good segue, because I was going to ask you, because this game does something very, very unique in that era, which is that the base game, when you install it, if you were to take a copy of the game itself and move it off of the original disc, like you have made a copy of this disc now, when you run it, you are prompted on startup to make a net only version of the application. How did that kind of come about?
Well, I'd forgotten about that until I was like looking at some notes that I had about the various versions of Pararena. And well, I again, trying to up the ante on the commercial one. I thought, this would be badass if you could play against another human. But latency on like an arcade type game like this, I was, and again, we're going back to the 1991 or thereabouts. It was going to be a problem, and I didn't know anything about networking either, but somehow I'd come across some code or something that would open up a real low-level kind of network connection between two Macs. And I mean, I swear it was just using like either the equivalent of a no modem cable or, connecting two Macs together. And it was super low level. I don't even know if there was any kind of a chooser or anything, maybe, but there was no, I don't even think there were any like checksum type stuff. So you would send a packet and the other player would send packets. You would just send packets to each other. And there wasn't really even any acknowledging that I got this packet. So any of that kind of error checking and, acts going back and forth, I feel like this was so low level, you were supposed to handle that yourself. So in order to get it so that you could play Pararena against another person on a computer, I was just sending, and I'm not going to be able to remember that far back, but something as simple as just the position of the ball and the player, and something like that. I don't know if I was sending the velocity. I was like sending the positions because I didn't want to. I mean, one way to do it is to essentially have all of your mouse movements sent over, and then the other machine tries to say, well, okay, if the other player that's on the network is moving their mouse in this position, then that means their player should move like this. Well, then very quickly they can get out of sync. If you have just anything wrong, like somebody's on a bigger display or who knows, they could get out of sync. So it was something like very low level, like I'll just send the position of the player, which way they're facing, where the ball is. And if they agree on where the ball is, then I'll just take your word for it and I'll draw your player where the network says you are. And it more or less worked out. I'd set up 2 Macs, I'd connect them together and start a network session. As I recall, it was a little bit dodgy. I don't know that it was that reliable, but if you could get it working, you could actually play against another human being. And so then it was kind of like, well, Cassidy and Greene wanted to put some kind of copy protection into Pararena. And so I thought, well, I don't know, I could, I feel like there was something that they were going to be able to do to the floppy disk to set some sector or some date or something that then Pararena could read and then say, oh, is that, does this look legit? I feel like you just, or no. There was a code that you had to enter. So there must have been a bunch of numbers that some kind of a checksum should come out to this one value. So you could make up numbers, but it would take, you'd be just guessing. But if you came up with a number whose checksum matched this magic number, then it would unlock the game. But you're right, maybe it would unlock it and then record what disk it was on. So that then if you moved it or something, then you would have to, again, go through the sort of registration thing. But the idea was, as you said, you could make a net-only version of the game. And that was just so that you didn't have to have 2 people having to buy Pararena. It's like, okay, I bought Pararena. Let's have a LAN party. Bring your Mac over, and I'll give you a copy of it. And it's not piracy. It will just be a network only. So you and I can play, but then when you go home, it's not going to function for you. Right. So that was kind of the idea, is to allow people to play a network game with a friend on another machine, but not have that person have to buy a copy of Pararena. So,
yep. I do think it's really neat though, because the even if you have a version that is again, the first time you launch it, it'll ask you, hey, are you sure? Do we want to set this to be a net only sort of copy of the game? You can take a full version of the game and convert it into a net only version. So if you, I do remember that there were people, the ethical pirates back in the day would be like, oh no, we're going to neuter all these copies and just make them net only. And they would redistribute those things specifically. Yeah, specifically so that way that people would be like, hey, if you've got a buddy, this game is worth buying, you should make the investment if you can. So yep. I do think that the game is really neat. I unfortunately it didn't do better in the market. That's a real shame, but there's so many cool things.
The buying public spoke.
Yeah.
I mean, you may have liked it, but apparently not that many people did.
Well, we got more glider as a result, and I guess that's a little bit of a kind of a consolation prize. But one thing I did want to ask you also about is and you teased it earlier. We were talking about the additional features and things like that were built into the kind of the commercial version of the game, the zooms and the instant replay sort of thing. So it does have a very sports event kind of feel. Yeah. So you at the vantage you're at watching the game field, and then the computer scores on you for the 5th time in as many seconds. You then the announcer comes out. So I mean, there's a lot to this. I mean, it feels like a big game compared to a lot of other things that were on the market at the time.
Well, yeah, no, that you're right. I mean, I was again with the instant replay, the announcer, that was again trying to make it, take it up a notch to feel like a sporting event. And I remember one thing that was added in the commercial version, I don't think is in the shareware, is I added a deal where if you hit the space bar, it's a kind of break. So sometimes you get kind of going crazy and you want to kind of stop and change direction. And part of the challenge of Pararena is that you kind of can't do that in general. So often you go outside the dish, end up in space and derez, and then that's a foul. And you get re-res, that transports you back into the game. And so something I added was if you hit the space bar, it's kind of like a little break. And I ended up using a squeaky sound, and it reminded me of a basketball game where you hear the people's sneakers when they stop and do a turn. And then I started noticing, watching basketball, how often that chirp sound is it's ubiquitous. That chirp sound of the sneaker on that polished wood doing a 180 and then chirp. And sure enough, if you play the commercial one and use the space bar, you'll hear a little chirp, and it does kind of slow you down. I mean, you don't come to a complete stop, but I think it slows you down a significant amount. So it might be able to save you from going off the edge of the dish. But it's also if you drop the ball and you have to head the other direction, it's nice to kind of hit the space bar. Or if an opponent's chasing you around, you can sometimes use the space bar and they'll collide into you, and then you can,
bounce them off and derez them.
Yeah.
Well, John, you'd also shared some media stuff with me. Why don't we take a few minutes and take a look at that?
Sure. Yeah, go ahead. So that is a screenshot where when I was first doing the shareware version of Glider, I wrote some code that would generate this parabola and use, as I say, this kind of skewing algorithm to kind of display it pseudo 3D. And so it was clear I wasn't going to be able to render it in real time. So I thought, well, if I render this, I can take a screenshot, and then I'll take it into a paint program, and then I can make it look pretty. I can add a starry background. I can put in shadows, and then that'll just be the sort of the background that I render. And then all the sprites, whether it's the ball or the players, they're just drawn on top of that, and they're not really a part of the dish, but you kind of make that. You think they are because you see the background, you see them, and so it feels like they're in the dish, but they're literally just being drawn on top of this backdrop. But again, I'm using the skewing algorithm for them. The physics make it look like they're kind of swinging, around up and down the dish. So I mean, it completes the illusion. But yeah, so this is like the first screenshot that I then from that pulled it into MacPaint and did the artwork.
I was going to say, because it's when you add color and you add the shading and stuff, it certainly does sell the illusion that you have something that is. I mean, you have to be careful because it's like a Necker's cube. It's like, wait a minute, they're on the outside of this surface.
Yeah. No, and this was the commercial one. Obviously, it's in color, but I think there's more meridians to it. So it got a little smoother, a little rounder. But also, I was targeting 640 by 480 at that point instead of 512. The Mac Plus that I had of the early black and white Macs. By the time you get to color, you can target 640. So I went with larger artwork, and then I put more meridians, and it looks more. But yeah, I mean, I can look at this and I can see that the Earth photo in the bottom right, that's probably clip art I found somewhere, and I paste that in. The dish itself, you select all the lines and you make them yellow, and then you shift them down by 1 pixel behind the artwork, and then it gives you a sort of a pseudo highlight. I just hand painted the grays to something that looked like, like what you would expect for, like, okay, it's darker over here because the incident light is coming in from this one side. It'll be brighter on this side where the incident light is hitting it. I'm looking at the background and I'm thinking that's probably the spray paint tool, just doing a little red and a little bit of blue. And there's now you've got a nebula. And Starfield, I'm probably just clicking, So yeah, and again, you've got kind of a nice backdrop that, as long as you follow the same physics that you would have used to get there, you can display balls and players, and they'll follow the same contours and that sort of thing. So yeah, this was fun. I guess this was done after Pararena. I think this was, well, it may have been when I was playing around with the commercial one. I thought, again, how do I up the game and make it, feel like it's worth paying $25 for, or whatever it was. So I thought, well, maybe there are different arenas. And so again, same code that generated the parabolic dish. Let's try doing a sinusoidal dish or something. I don't remember if I don't remember ever playing it like that, but I think the app that I wrote that would generate these, maybe I could roll balls around in it or something and try it out. But yeah, I mean, really, what's this going to?
I just if you're one of the players, don't eat before going out on the field. I would say that. Whoa,
Yeah. I don't know. So anyway, this was just sort of just good.
It's an interesting concept.
Yeah.
But it was nice to get some coverage in Macworld for sure. This is from the January 91 issue of Macworld.
Yeah, I think I see kit pics at the top. This must be the shareware. I think they may have done. Oh yeah, and I see. Yeah, Pararena 1.1, Glider 3.0. So this was like they must have had a shareware, best of the shareware issue or something. So I see Glider in there, and then I see Billiards, Baker's Dozen. I know Eric Snyder. He wrote a lot of really good solitaire type games. Solarian 2, Ben Holler. That was great. That was the first color game for the Mac that had digitized sounds. And again, I met Ben Holler once. I don't remember if it was at a Macworld or something. He was a pretty interesting guy.
Yeah. Pararena 1.0 by John Calhoun of Soft Dorothy Software is a challenging cross between roller derby and skateboarding in black and white. The shareware fee, $5.
$8
or $8. Oh gosh, sorry. I was sorry. That was when it was on sale on whatever the equivalent of Steam was back then. Sorry.
There wasn't a Steam.
There was, but it was actually burn your hand.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, those are the sprites. That's the sprite sheet that the commercial game used. And you can see there's just two players. There's green and yellow, and there's a magenta and blue, and then what else is going on in there? There's
shadows and
digits. Those are the masks. They're not really shadows. They're masks so that I can copy the image out and not have any of the white background. This mask where it's black says that's the pixels that count. Yes, there's the player rotated and then the player both squatted down and standing, because when you pick up a ball or release it, the player would squat. And then I see the ball, and in the upper left, I see various lights that are probably indicate fouls and that sort of thing. And then those are the left side. Those must be the guards that are around both sides, the panels that are around both sides of the goals. And then in the commercial game, at least, there were sort of skill levels, and if you were a real beginner, it would open the goal really wide, so that it was hard. It was very easy. If you just generally threw the ball in the right direction, it would go into the goal. But as you got up in difficulty level, it got to where it was kind of a narrow opening, and that's what the opponent had. They had a narrow opening, so that you were kind of on at that point, an even playing field. But yeah, that's the sprites from that.
Yep.
All hand drawn. Yep. Labels. That was the thing I forgot to ask, because I have never seen a retail box for this game. So I guess because they didn't sell very many, so this might be kind of rare, just because
I think so
few of them sold. But yeah, this is the box that it shipped on. It's got a screenshot on the back, and they hired some artists to do this. And I was really I liked what Cassidy and Greene had come up with for Glider, with the little airplane in the house. And I mean, it was, it was, I don't know, it wasn't exactly like the game, but it sort of gave the same sort of feel. But yeah, this, I don't know, I really didn't care for it. I guess it's just, it looked kind of, I don't know, it just looked kind of junior-ish. I mean, somebody who's just learning how to draw. So I really was disappointed in the cover that they came up with.
I think it's just supposed to be a little garish. It's supposed to be a little flashy. Somebody is walking past it, software, etc., just to catch their eye.
Okay.
You know, and it does look very similar to some other Cassidy and Greene covers from that same era, and it has that weird, more square box instead of a more kind of. Do you think about big box PC software?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if that was just. I know that it's important, like in commercial space, that they have end caps, and they, and there's certain ways the boxes are supposed to be. Maybe it was just the popular format at that time. That boxes were kind of, and it had to be a certain thickness so that they could stack them on shelves and fit more of them. I don't know, but yeah, I wasn't really happy with what they came up with for that. But yeah, there's the sticker that. So this is in the the sketch I did, and so I would do like the thing by hand and pencil on paper, and then. When I had something I liked, I might ink it in with like a marker or something and then scan that. And then once it was scanned, you brought it in digitally. That's what this is, I think, is the digital scan. Then you pull it into probably Studio 8. I mean, either that or Photoshop 1.0. I mean, back in that time.
Right.
So then I would have pulled it in. And then all the color would have been applied digitally once it had been scanned in. But the idea of trying to hand draw that with a mouse on the computer, forget it. I'm much more comfortable doing on Sketchpad with a pencil and then inking that, then scanning it and coloring it. So this was to be part of the artwork for like this, the about box or whatever. And I guess it's Miss Teak, I'm guessing by the T on her uniform, her outfit. So yeah, there's the colorization. So there's the, the dish, and she's composited with a little shadow. And then I, again, did a little sketch of like the referee and somebody else and scanned those in and put them in the dish. So it's kind of like before the game begins or something like that. You've got officials down there in the dish, and she's kind of anticipating the game coming. So I put this together and proposed it as the cover for the game, but Cassidy and Greene said, yeah, no, we're not going to go with that. And they went with,
They went with what they went with.
this one. And I'll say this one looks like there's action, and the one I did there's no action. So, I mean, I get that. I didn't care for the way the person did figures in the one that shipped.
It has always been my speculation that the guy down there arguing with the referee is actually a janitor who is saying, "You mean I gotta wax this whole damn thing? Come on!"
I don't know who he is. I put headphones on him because you would see the coach or whoever had headphones on in games. So I figured he's a coach or something like that. But
it's John
maybe
Madden.
He's the referee.
You can't escape him. He's everywhere.
So. This was the about box that I submitted in when I would send my versions off to Cassidy and Greene. And Michael Greene, when he saw this, he said, yeah, no, John, we're not going to do that. I said, what? He says, come on. I said, come on what? He says, come on. Your ass. I said, so if you look at what's in the game, she's kind of moved down, but I liked this, for whatever reason. I liked it this way, but no, he said, no, we're not going to ship that. So I hung on to it, though. This was what it should have been, was going to be.
Well, anyway, that was pretty interesting. I had not seen some of that art before. And again, I had never seen the box for Pararena. I think maybe I was searching online for it. Maybe the search criteria I'm using is like too specific. So that's really neat. I'm really glad that's really a thing, and it wasn't just some sort of mail order affair. I know that Cassidy and Greene, for some products, it ended up just going out kind of in a generic cardboard mailer. So it's
somebody pointed to one of those recently, and my recollection was when Cassidy and Greene would go to a trade show like Macworld, they would bring their games, and they would sell them in a generic mailer on the store floor.
Yeah.
And part of that was to pay for the booth that they had to pay for. But they couldn't actually sell the boxed game, and because often on the same trade floor, there would be a computer warehouse, Mac warehouse or whatever, selling, and you didn't want to compete with your distributors. Right. So they'd say, well, we're not really competing, because they'd also sell it for less than Mac Warehouse. But they're like, well, we're not really selling it in the box. It's just in an envelope, and I don't know. Somehow that was a way to kind of work around that. So that may have been what you may have seen, is one of those ones that they sold through the at a trade show.
Yeah, well, it's very possible. But it's kind of nice, though. Nowadays, anybody can get access to it. I know you talked about that it's available in places you can download it online. It's on Macintosh Garden. It's on archive.org, places like that. But I think early last year, you went through on your GitHub, which is github.com/engineersneedart. And I'll make sure to have a link to that in the show notes, that you released all of this stuff where anybody can take it. They can look at the code, they could compile it. All the tools are built into the image, where you can use the compilers that are from that era to make your own versions. And the coolest part, John, is that every version of Pararena had been archived except for the very last version, 207. So now you can go and
build
compile.
207.
Yes.
True. Yeah, there were some people going through the code, though, and when I would write, there were some functions internal names where I had, like, if I had to bring up an alert, like, you need to be in 16 colors or something like that, I'd write the name of the function would be like bitch about colors or something. And I mean, I didn't expect anyone going to see that. But then I go and put the sources up, and I see people in comments saying, oh, there's all this bitch about this and that. And I'm like, oh, okay, if I'd have known people were going to be looking at it 20 years later, maybe I wouldn't have named them, things like that. But yeah, it's all there.
Still, it's fun stuff to find. But John, thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking time, especially I know you travel a lot. You got a lot going on. Take a few minutes, talk to me, talk to the people at home, sort of about this kind of important part of Macintosh history.
Sure. Yeah. No, it's no problem. And I just road trip a lot. I don't travel per se. I'm not like taking cruises or anything. But yeah, I do like to road trip. Not this time of year, though.
Yeah, a little cold, a lot going on. So
yeah, soon.
A Macintosh trade show is unlike any other computer conference. In fact, it's more like a love fest than a trade show, with adoring Mac users eager to gobble up the latest Macintosh products and applications. And then, of course, there is the Mac head view of the world. Like, why do all those other people waste their time on Windows? Today, we'll show you why no one in Boston cares about Chicago on this special Macworld edition of the Computer Chronicles.
Sure, there were word processors, spreadsheets, and databases here at Boston's Macworld Expo, but there was also lots of fun stuff. Cassidy and Greene introduced a fascinating Macintosh game called Glider. Your mission is to fly a paper airplane through the many rooms of a house using only the airflow from the heating system. The game's developer is John Calhoun.
I use sort of as a metaphor in this game, spring, bright colors, oranges, yellows, outdoors, not claustrophobic, Art Nouveau, Maxfield Parrish, turn of the century, Little Nemo and Slumberland. So there's a lot of childhood fantasy, flowers and that kind of, that was sort of the metaphor in that. And then once you have sort of a theme or a metaphor for a game like that, everything follows, in the development process.
If you're into music, Opcode announced